Sarah Chen sat in the back corner of Advanced Theoretical Physics, her notebook filled with doodles of stars and spaceships instead of equations. Professor Martinez droned on about quantum mechanics while Sarah's mind wandered to distant galaxies. Her classmates saw her as the quiet girl who never spoke unless called upon, always wearing oversized sweaters that made her seem to disappear into the furniture. What they didn't know was that Sarah's doodles weren't random sketches. They were schematics for weapons that could level entire star systems. The equations she absent-mindedly scribbled in margins weren't homework problems, but calculations for faster-than-light engines that made current technology look like stone tools. During lunch, Sarah sat alone under the old oak tree, picking at her sandwich while reading what appeared to be a romance novel. The cover showed a shirtless man embracing a woman in a flowing dress. But behind that false cover was a detailed analysis of alien combat tactics from 17 different species across the galaxy. Sarah had been studying them for months, preparing for something her classmates couldn't even imagine. A shadow fell across her book. Tommy Rodriguez, captain of the football team, stood grinning down at her with his usual cocky expression. Behind him stood his 3 closest friends, all built like linebackers and twice as mean. "Hey there, space girl," Tommy said, using the nickname he'd given her after seeing her star doodles. "Reading about aliens again? You know they're not real, right?" Sarah looked up with her large brown eyes, pushing her thick glasses up her nose. "I know," she said quietly, closing her book and holding it protectively against her chest. "Come on, don't be shy," Tommy continued, reaching for her book. "Let's see what kind of weird stuff you're into today." What Tommy didn't know was that Sarah's reflexes had been enhanced through years of combat training in zero-gravity environments. When his hand moved toward her book, her body automatically calculated 17 different ways to disable him before he could blink. She chose to do nothing, simply pulling the book closer. "Please leave me alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. To Tommy and his friends, she looked like a frightened mouse. They had no idea they were threatening the most dangerous human being on the planet. Tommy laughed and grabbed for the book anyway. His fingers barely touched the cover before Sarah's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with what seemed like gentle pressure. Tommy's face immediately turned white as pain shot up his arm. He tried to pull away but couldn't move. "I asked you to leave me alone," Sarah repeated, her voice still quiet but carrying an edge that made his friends step backward. She released his wrist and Tommy stumbled back, clutching his arm. "What the hell?" he gasped, staring at the small girl who had somehow made him feel like his bones were about to break. Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the message and her expression changed completely. The scared, shy girl vanished, replaced by someone with hard eyes and perfect posture. She stood up in one fluid motion, gathering her things with military precision. "I have to go," she said, but now her voice carried authority that made even Tommy's friends automatically step aside. As she walked away, Tommy called after her, "This isn't over, freak." Sarah paused and turned back. For just a moment, Tommy saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was the look of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort. "Yes," she said simply. "It is." She walked across the campus toward the parking lot, her entire demeanor transformed. Students who had never noticed shy Sarah Chen suddenly found themselves stepping out of her way, without knowing why. Something primal in their brains recognized the presence of an apex predator. At her beat-up Honda Civic, Sarah opened the trunk and moved aside a pile of textbooks. Underneath was a metal case that shouldn't have been able to fit in such a small space. She pressed her thumb to a scanner hidden in the lock. The case opened to reveal technology that wouldn't be invented on Earth for another 200 years. She pulled out what looked like a smartphone but was actually a quantum communicator, capable of reaching across the galaxy instantly. The message that had interrupted her lunch was from Admiral Korath of the Galactic Defense Force. "Agent Phoenix," the message read in the flowing script of the Altarian language. "Priority 1 alert. Vorthon invasion fleet detected entering Sol system. Estimated arrival in 72 hours. Earth's cover blown. Recommend immediate activation of sleeper protocols." Sarah's fingers flew across the device, typing a response in perfect Altarian. "Acknowledged. Beginning Phase 1 preparations. Will maintain cover until absolutely necessary." She closed the case and arranged the textbooks back on top. To anyone watching, she was just a college student checking her phone. They couldn't see the micro-expressions, crossing her face as she calculated logistics for that would determine whether humanity survived the next week. Sarah had been placed on Earth 18 years ago as part of the most classified operation in galactic history. She was the daughter of Admiral Chen of the human colonial fleet, genetically enhanced and trained from birth to be the perfect deep cover operative. Her mission was simple: observe and protect Earth until humanity was ready to join the galactic community. That timeline had just been moved up by about 50 years. As she drove home to her small apartment off campus, Sarah's mind was already shifting into tactical mode. She had weapons hidden in 17 locations around the city, enough firepower to outfit a small army. She had established connections with 12 other deep cover operatives positioned around the globe, though they didn't know about each other. Most importantly, she had spent 4 years studying her fellow humans, learning their strengths and weaknesses, preparing for the day when she would have to turn the shy college girl into Earth's first line of defense against an invasion that could end their species. The Vorthons were coming. They were a species that had conquered 47 worlds and enslaved 16 different intelligent species. They were bigger, stronger, and more technologically advanced than baseline humans. But they had never fought enhanced humans who had been trained in every form of combat known to the galaxy. They had never faced someone who could shift from harmless college student to lethal operative in the space of a heartbeat. As Sarah parked outside her apartment building, she looked up at the stars that were just becoming visible in the evening sky. Somewhere out there, an armada of warships was bearing down on Earth, confident that they would find an easy conquest. They were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy both feared and respected humanity. Sarah's apartment looked like any college student's place. Pizza boxes stacked on the counter, textbooks scattered across a cheap desk, posters of boy bands on the walls. But the seemingly random placement of furniture created perfect firing lines to every entrance. The innocent-looking mirror by the door was actually a high-tech scanner that could detect weapons and analyze biometric data of anyone who entered. She moved to what appeared to be a broken microwave in the corner. A quick sequence of touches on specific spots revealed a hidden panel containing her real communication equipment. Sarah activated a quantum-encrypted channel that reached beyond Earth's solar system. "Colonial Command, this is Agent Phoenix," she spoke into the device, requesting immediate status update on Vorthon fleet composition and intended landing zones. The response came back in Admiral Chen's voice, though no one on Earth knew that the shy college girl was actually the daughter of one of humanity's greatest military leaders. "Phoenix, we're tracking a battle group of 200 ships, primary force heading for major population centers. They're planning standard Vorthon tactics, simultaneous strikes on all continents to prevent organized resistance. You have 67 hours before they reach Earth orbit." Sarah felt her chest tighten. 200 ships was more than she had prepared for. Each Vorthon ship carried approximately 3,000 soldiers, all genetically engineered for conquest. Even with her abilities and hidden resources, the numbers were overwhelming. "Sir, requesting permission to begin awakening other assets," she said. "Negative, Phoenix. The other sleeper agents are not ready. Their covers are too important for long-term operations. You are authorized to recruit local assets only." Sarah closed her eyes. Local assets meant normal humans with no enhancement, no training, and no idea what they were about to face. It should have been impossible. But as she thought about her classmates, her professors, even jerks like Tommy Rodriguez, she felt something burning in her chest that her Altarian combat instructors had tried to train out of her. It was the same thing that had driven humanity to spread across the galaxy when every other species said it was impossible. The stubborn refusal to quit that made humans the most feared soldiers in known space, even though they were physically weaker than most species. "Understood, sir. Beginning Phase 2 preparations." She cut the connection and began assembling her gear. From various hiding spots around the apartment, she retrieved items that looked like common objects but were actually advanced weapons and equipment. A hairbrush became a plasma rifle. A makeup compact contained enough explosive to level a city block. Her college backpack was lined with armor that could stop projectiles moving at 30% the speed of light. But first, she needed information about the enemy's exact plans. For that, she would have to do something she had avoided for 4 years. Use her real abilities where others could see them. The next morning at university, Sarah looked exactly the same as always. Oversized sweater, thick glasses, messy hair tied back with a rubber band. She sat in her usual spot in Professor Martinez's class, But this time she was listening to every word with complete focus. The SETI program has detected some unusual signals, Professor Martinez was saying. Nothing confirmed yet, but there are rumors that something big is coming from the astronomy department. Sarah's enhanced hearing picked up conversations from 3 other classrooms. In the computer science building, someone was talking about satellite anomalies. In the physics lab, graduate students were arguing about gravitational disturbances that didn't match any known phenomena. The Vorthon fleet was already affecting Earth's detection systems. That meant they were closer than expected. During lunch, instead of sitting under her tree, Sarah walked to the campus computer lab. She sat at a terminal in the back corner where she could watch all the entrances. To everyone around her, she appeared to be working on homework. Actually, she was hacking into every major observatory, satellite network, and radar installation on the planet. What she found made her blood run cold. The Vorthons weren't just coming to conquer Earth. They were coming to harvest it. Thermal scans showed that their ships were equipped with atmospheric processors designed to strip mine entire planets. They weren't planning to enslave humanity. They were planning to eliminate it entirely and strip Earth of every useful resource. This changed everything. There would be no negotiation, no possibility of surrender. This was extinction or victory, with no middle ground. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard as she began implementing protocols that had been theoretical until this moment. She sent coded messages to key individuals around the globe, not the other sleeper agents, but carefully selected humans who had the right combination of skills, resources, and psychological profiles to be effective in an asymmetric war. A former Marine colonel who now taught high school and was known for never giving up on difficult students. A video game designer whose simulations were actually detailed tactical planning programs. A teenager in Somalia who had been organizing resistance movements since she was 12 years old. Each received what appeared to be a scholarship opportunity or job offer that would bring them to specific locations at precise times. As she worked, Sarah became aware that someone was watching her. She glanced up to see Jessica Wong, her lab partner from chemistry class, staring at her with curious eyes. "Hey, Sarah," Jessica said, sitting down at the next computer. "What are you working on? That doesn't look like any homework I've seen." Sarah's enhanced reflexes calculated 37 ways to disable Jessica before she could alert anyone else. Instead, she made a decision that would have horrified her Altarian instructors. "Can you keep a secret?" Sarah asked quietly. Jessica nodded, leaning closer. "The really big secret kind where if you tell anyone, people might die?" Now Jessica looked concerned, but she nodded again. Sarah turned her screen so Jessica could see it. Instead of homework, it showed real-time satellite feeds of space with small dots moving in formation toward Earth's solar system. "Those are alien warships," Sarah said simply. "They'll be here tomorrow night. They're coming to kill everyone on Earth and strip mine the planet." Jessica stared at the screen for a long moment, then looked at Sarah with new eyes. "Who are you?" "My name really is Sarah Chen, and I really am a 19-year-old college student. But I'm also a deep cover operative for the Human Colonial Defense Force, genetically enhanced and trained since childhood to be humanity's early warning system." Jessica's eyes widened. "Colonial Defense Force? You mean there are already humans in space?" "Lots of them. Earth was supposed to be slowly introduced to galactic civilization over the next 50 years. That timeline just got moved up to the next 48 hours. Sarah pulled up another screen showing the Vorthon fleet composition. "I need help, Jessica. I can't fight 200 ships by myself, but I can teach people to fight them on the ground when they land." Jessica looked at the numbers, then back at Sarah. "You're serious. This is really happening. It's really happening. And right now you're the first person I'm trusting with the truth." Sarah's voice carried the weight of someone who had been carrying the world's fate alone for years. "I need to know if you're in." Jessica was quiet for 30 seconds, staring at the alien ships on the screen. Then she looked at Sarah with determination that reminded her why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. "What do you need me to do?" Within 6 hours, Jessica had proven why Sarah's psychological profiles had been accurate. She didn't panic, didn't question the impossible, and didn't waste time with denial. Instead, she became Sarah's first lieutenant in what was about to become the most important recruitment drive in human history. They set up operations in the university's abandoned bomb shelter, a relic from the Cold War that most students didn't even know existed. Sarah's enhanced strength made quick work of moving equipment while Jessica handled the technical setup with surprising skill. Computer science minor, Jessica explained when Sarah complimented her work. I've been hacking systems since I was 14. My parents think I just play video games. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Perfect. I need you to send messages to specific people. Make it look like coincidences. Job offers, contest winnings, emergency situations that require them to be in exact locations at precise times. As Jessica worked, Sarah began the delicate process of revealing the truth to carefully selected individuals. The first was Dr. Marcus Webb, a former Army Ranger who now taught military history. She found him in his office, grading papers about World War II tactics. Dr. Webb, Sarah said, closing the door behind her, I need to talk to you about current events. He looked up, surprised to see the quiet girl from his morning seminar. Of course, Sarah, what's on your mind? She pulled out her quantum communicator and showed him real-time footage of the Vorthan fleet. Sir, my name is Agent Phoenix, Human Colonial Defense Force. Earth is about to be invaded by an alien species that has already conquered 47 worlds. I need your help to organize a resistance. Dr. Webb stared at the device for 10 seconds. Then he set down his pen and looked at her with combat veteran eyes that suddenly recognized another soldier. How long do we have? 36 hours until they reach orbit. Maybe 48 hours until ground assault begins. Personnel? You, me, my tech specialist, and whoever we can recruit and train in the next day and a half. Dr. Webb stood up and began pulling books from his shelves. But these weren't textbooks, they were field manuals he kept hidden behind academic covers. Equipment? I have enough advanced weapons to outfit 50 people. After that, we improvise. Terrain advantages? They'll land near major cities for maximum psychological impact. We make them fight in environments they've never seen before. Subway systems, skyscrapers, industrial areas. Force them into close quarters where their technology advantage is minimized. Dr. Webb smiled grimly. Asymmetric warfare against a technologically superior force. I've done this before. He paused. Agent Phoenix, how old are you really? 19, sir. But I've been training for this since I was 3. That evening, their core team had grown to 12 people. Each recruit had been carefully selected based on psychological profiles and specific skills. Maria Santos, an engineering student who could build explosives from household chemicals. David Kim, a parkour enthusiast who knew every rooftop and tunnel in the city. Emma Rodriguez, a pre-med student with field surgery experience from volunteer work in disaster zones. None of them had military training, but all of them had something more valuable: the human refusal to give up when facing impossible odds. Sarah stood before her newly assembled team in the bomb shelter, looking like the shy college girl they all knew, but speaking with the authority of someone trained by the best military minds in the galaxy. The Vorthons are expecting to face a primitive species with crude weapons and no coordination, she said. They've conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics, overwhelming force followed by systematic elimination of resistance. They've never fought humans before. She activated a holographic display that showed Vorthon combat doctrine. The aliens were 2 meters tall, heavily armored, and carried weapons that could punch through tank armor. Their tactics relied on superior firepower and intimidation. But they have weaknesses, Sarah continued. They're used to fighting species that surrender when faced with superior force. They've never dealt with guerrilla tactics, and they've never encountered humans who refuse to stay down no matter how many times they get hit. Jessica raised her hand. What about our military? The actual army? They'll fight, but they're not prepared for this level of technology. Conventional forces will buy us time, but the real battle will be fought by small units using hit-and-run tactics. Dr. Webb studied the holographic displays. What's their primary weakness? Sarah smiled, and for the first time, her classmates saw the predator that lived behind the shy exterior. They think they understand humans based on observing us from a distance. They've watched our movies, studied our history, analyzed our psychology, but they've never met a human who's been trained by alien combat instructors and enhanced with galactic technology. She touched controls on her device, and her appearance began to change. The thick glasses folded away, revealing contacts that had been dampening her enhanced vision. Her posture straightened, showing the perfect military bearing that had been hidden under slouched shoulders. Most dramatically, her nervous, quiet demeanor vanished completely, replaced by the confident presence of someone who had been trained to command. The shy girl you've known for months was a cover identity, she said. I'm actually Agent Phoenix, the youngest graduate of the Altarian War College, and the only human to score perfect marks in every form of combat known to galactic civilization. Maria stared at her. You mean you've been pretending to be afraid of everything? Not pretending to be afraid. Learning to control fear and use it as a weapon. Sarah's voice carried complete certainty. Tomorrow, when those ships arrive, they're going to discover that they've picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Humans don't just fight until they win. Humans fight until their enemies are completely defeated or they themselves are dead. She looked around the room at faces that were scared but determined. Every one of you has something that makes you dangerous in your own way. Maria, you can turn a chemistry lab into an armory. David, you can move through this city like a ghost. Emma, you can keep fighters alive when they should be dead. The holographic display shifted to show the city from above, marked with defensive positions and supply caches. Dr. Webb and I will handle direct combat. The rest of you will be force multipliers, making sure that every shot we fire counts, every move we make is coordinated, and every advantage we can create is exploited. Jessica looked at the tactical display with growing understanding. You're not planning to fight them off. You're planning to teach them not to mess with humans. Exactly. The Vorthans have enslaved 16 species by making them afraid to fight back. When other civilizations hear about what happens here, they'll know that humans don't get enslaved. We win, or we make victory so expensive that nobody else wants to try. As the team dispersed to begin preparations, Dr. Webb approached Sarah privately. Agent Phoenix, I have to ask, with your abilities and training, couldn't you have prevented this invasion somehow? Sarah looked out through the small window at the campus where she had spent 4 years pretending to be a normal student. Sir, Earth wasn't supposed to be ready for galactic contact for decades. I was placed here to observe and report, not to prevent contact entirely. But the Vorthans decided to skip the formal introduction process. She turned back to him with eyes that held knowledge far beyond her apparent age. Besides, maybe it's time for Earth to join the galaxy the way humans do everything else, by proving that we can't be conquered, can't be intimidated, and can't be stopped once we decide to fight. Through the window, the first hints of unusual activity were visible in the night sky. Shooting stars that moved in formation, satellites that changed course without explanation. The invasion had begun. The Vorthon fleet emerged from hyperspace at exactly 0347 hours, Earth time. Sarah was awake in the command center they had established in the bomb shelter, monitoring communications from around the globe. The first reports came from deep space tracking stations, then from military satellites, and finally from amateur astronomers who couldn't believe what their telescopes were showing them. 200 ships, each the size of a city block, arranged in perfect formation above Earth's atmosphere. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek black vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. For 30 minutes, they simply hung there, letting humanity see them and understand what was coming. Then the broadcasts began. Every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth suddenly carried the same signal. A figure appeared on screens worldwide, a Vorthon commander standing 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plating that looked like polished obsidian. When it spoke, translation software converted its words into every human language simultaneously. Inhabitants of the third planet, the commander said, its voice carrying the confidence of someone who had delivered this speech 47 times before. I am War Leader Thax of the Vorthon Empire. Your world has been selected for resource extraction. You have 6 of your time periods called hours to surrender all military forces and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in complete elimination of your species. The broadcast cut to footage from other conquered worlds. Cities burning, populations fleeing, entire civilizations collapsing within days. It was psychological warfare designed to break resistance before the fighting even started. But Sarah was watching something else. Her enhanced vision could detect the micro-expressions on War Leader Thakix's face, the subtle body language that indicated emotions. What she saw there made her smile. The Vorthon commander was nervous. Dr. Webb, she called across the command center. Look at this. She replayed the broadcast, highlighting specific moments. Watch his stance when he mentions resistance. See how his armor plates shift slightly? That's a Vorthon stress response. Dr. Webb studied the footage. He's worried about something, but what? They have overwhelming force advantage. He's worried because this is the first time they've tried to conquer a species that's already spread to other worlds. He knows that humans in the colonial fleet are watching this, and if Earth falls too easily, it makes humanity look weak in galactic politics. Sarah pulled up tactical displays showing Vorthon troop movements. The ships were taking positions above major cities exactly as predicted. But more importantly, he's worried because their intelligence on Earth humans is outdated. They don't know about people like us. Around the globe, Sarah's carefully placed assets were activating. The former Marine colonel in Chicago was organizing urban resistance cells. The video game designer in Tokyo was coordinating defensive strategies that looked like chaos, but were actually intricate tactical maneuvers. The teenage resistance leader in Somalia was teaching her methods to fighters on every continent. Meanwhile, conventional military forces were mobilizing. Fighter jets screamed toward the alien ships only to be destroyed by weapons that turned matter into energy. Missiles launched from submarines simply vanished before reaching their targets. Tank columns moved into position around major cities, knowing they were obsolete but refusing to surrender without a fight. It was exactly what Sarah had expected. The formal military would buy time through sacrifice, demonstrating human courage to the galaxy, while the real battle was prepared by unconventional forces. 6 hours after the deadline, the Vorthons began their descent. The first landing craft were intercepted by human fighters in a display of aerial combat that was hopeless, but magnificent. F-22 Raptors and F-35 Lightning jets engaged alien ships that outclassed them in every way, scoring hits through pure skill and determination before being destroyed. Each pilot knew they couldn't win, but they fought anyway, buying precious minutes for ground forces to prepare. Sarah watched from the university's clock tower, which she had converted into an observation post. Through her enhanced vision, she could see Vorthon dropships approaching the city. Each ship carried approximately 100 soldiers, all equipped with personal energy shields and weapons that could level buildings. Positions, she said into her communicator. Around the city, her team moved into carefully prepared locations. Maria had set up explosive traps in key choke points. David was moving through the underground tunnel system with charges designed to channel alien forces into kill zones. Emma had established mobile medical stations that could be reached quickly by wounded fighters. The first Vorthon soldiers landed in the central plaza, expecting to find panicking civilians and token resistance from primitive weapons. Instead, they found a deserted area filled with what appeared to be abandoned vehicles and debris. Sarah had studied Vorthon psychology extensively. They were predators who relied on intimidation and overwhelming displays of force. When they encountered unexpected situations, they became cautious and methodical, exactly what she needed. The aliens began advancing through the city in formation, scanning for threats with their advanced sensors. What they didn't detect were the purely mechanical traps that Maria had constructed using knowledge of chemistry and physics. As the first squad moved past a seemingly wrecked car, Maria triggered explosives that had been disguised as engine parts. The blast wouldn't have damaged the aliens' armor under normal circumstances, but the explosion also released a cloud of thermite that burned at over 2,000 degrees Celsius. Vorthon armor was designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, not molten metal that flowed into joints and gaps. 3 aliens went down, screaming in voices that sounded like grinding metal. That was Sarah's signal. She dropped from the clock tower in a controlled fall that should have killed an unenhanced human. Her genetically modified muscles absorbed the impact as she landed directly in the middle of the Vorthon formation. Before they could react, she drew weapons that looked like ordinary human firearms but fired projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The Vorthons had encountered enhanced humans before, but never one trained in their own combat techniques. Sarah moved through their formation like a dancer, using footwork from 17 different alien martial arts to stay inside their guard where their heavy weapons couldn't target her. Effectively, her first shot punched through a Vorthon's chest armor and continued through the alien behind him. Her second shot took the head off their squad leader. Her third shot hit their communications specialist, cutting them off from orbital support. But Sarah's real advantage wasn't her enhanced abilities. It was that she fought like a human. Vortons were used to civilized warfare with rules and predictable tactics. They had never faced an opponent who would use every dirty trick, every psychological warfare technique, and every environmental advantage available. As she fought, Sarah shouted taunts in perfect Vorthan language, using insults that questioned their competence, their courage, and their genetic worthiness. The aliens had never encountered psychological warfare combined with lethal combat skills. They began making mistakes, breaking formation, firing wildly. That's when the rest of her team struck. David emerged from manholes throughout the plaza, using his parkour skills to move across buildings and obstacles while firing weapons that Sarah had taught him to use. Maria's explosives turned the central plaza into a maze of fire and debris that channeled the aliens exactly where Sarah wanted them. Dr. Webb led a team of student volunteers in a frontal assault that looked suicidal but was actually a precisely calculated maneuver designed to force the Vorthans into a specific defensive position. When they took cover behind what appeared to be a concrete barrier, they discovered too late that it was filled with explosives. Within 20 minutes, an entire Vorthon assault force had been eliminated by 12 college students, a history professor, and one genetically enhanced operative who looked like she should be studying for finals. As Sarah stood among the alien bodies, she activated her quantum communicator. This time, she wasn't contacting the colonial fleet. She was sending a message on frequencies that she knew the Vorthans would intercept. "War Leader Thax," she said, speaking perfect High Vorthon that indicated noble education. "This is Agent Phoenix of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Your ground assault has failed. Your soldiers died screaming the names of their genetic mothers. Perhaps you would like to discuss terms of surrender." The response came back immediately, filled with rage and disbelief. "Impossible. We are monitoring your forces. You are primitives with crude weapons." Sarah smiled as she looked around at her team. Jessica was tending wounded civilians. Maria was already preparing new explosive devices. David was scouting for the next battle. Dr. Webb was coordinating with other resistance cells across the city. "You're monitoring the wrong forces," Sarah replied. "These aren't primitives with crude weapons. These are humans who refuse to quit. There's a difference." War Leader Thax made the mistake that had doomed 47 other worlds. He let anger override tactical thinking. Instead of reassessing the situation and adapting strategy, he ordered massive orbital bombardment of the human city, where his forces had been defeated. The energy beams that lanced down from space could have carved through mountains. They struck the central plaza where Sarah's team had fought, turning concrete and steel into molten glass. From orbit, it looked like the resistance had been completely eliminated. But Sarah had anticipated this response. The moment her team had withdrawn from the plaza, they had dispersed into the underground tunnel system that connected the entire city. The orbital bombardment destroyed empty buildings while the real defenders moved through a three-dimensional maze that the Vorthans couldn't map from space. Phase 2, Sarah announced through her quantum communicator to resistance cells worldwide. Enemy has revealed orbital capabilities and psychological profile. Beginning asymmetric response. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations. Instead of trying to fight the Vorthon fleet directly, Sarah's network began targeting something the aliens hadn't expected: their credibility. Using Jessica's hacking skills and David's ability to move unseen through the city, they began broadcasting footage of the battle to every corner of the galaxy. The video showed Vorthon soldiers, supposedly the most elite warriors in known space, being defeated by human college students using improvised weapons and tactics that prioritized cleverness over firepower. More importantly, it showed humans who kept fighting even when facing impossible odds. Within hours, the footage was being analyzed by intelligence services on dozens of worlds. The Galactic Council, which had remained neutral during previous Vorthon conquests, suddenly began emergency sessions to discuss the situation on Earth. But Sarah's real masterstroke was psychological. She had studied Vorthon culture extensively and knew their greatest weakness. They were a hierarchical society based on demonstrated competence in battle. War Leader Thax had built his reputation on quick, overwhelming victories. Every hour that Earth continued to resist made him look weak to his own forces. Using her knowledge of Vorthon military communication protocols, Sarah began intercepting and altering orders from the fleet command to ground forces. The changes were subtle: troop movements delayed by minutes, supply drops redirected to wrong coordinates, tactical updates that contained tiny but crucial errors. The result was that Vorthon forces on the ground began experiencing the kind of logistical problems that had never occurred in their previous conquests. Equipment failures, communication breakdowns, units arriving at objectives to find no enemies or encountering resistance where none was expected. Meanwhile, human resistance was growing stronger by the hour. Dr. Webb had made contact with military units around the globe, sharing intelligence about Vorthan tactics and weaknesses. The information spread through formal and informal networks until even isolated units knew exactly how to target alien equipment and exploit gaps in their armor. Maria's expertise in improvised explosives was being transmitted to resistance cells worldwide. Using common household chemicals and basic electronics, human fighters began creating weapons that could damage Vorthan vehicles and equipment. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that could turn any shopping mall or apartment building into an armory. Most importantly, the story of the shy college girl who had become humanity's most dangerous weapon was spreading across Earth faster than the Vorthans could suppress it. Sarah Chen had become a symbol of human refusal to surrender, proof that even the most unlikely person could become a lethal force when defending their home. The psychological impact was extraordinary. Around the globe, ordinary people began standing up to alien occupation forces. A librarian in London used her knowledge of the city's layout to guide resistance fighters through forgotten tunnels. A chef in Mumbai created chemical weapons from kitchen supplies. A retired teacher in São Paulo organized neighborhood children into an intelligence network that tracked alien movements. But Sarah knew that inspiration alone wouldn't win the war. The Vorthans still had overwhelming technological superiority and could simply sterilize the planet from orbit if ground resistance became too costly. She needed to force them into a position where total destruction would be unacceptable. That's when she implemented the most audacious part of her plan. Using her quantum communicator, Sarah sent a message not to the Vorthan fleet, but to the Galactic Council chambers on Altair Prime. The transmission was sent on open frequencies that every civilized species in the galaxy monitored for emergency communications. This is Agent Phoenix, Human Colonial Defense Force broadcasting from Earth during active Vorthan invasion, she said, speaking in formal galactic standard that indicated diplomatic credentials. I am requesting immediate mediation under Article 7 of the Galactic Warfare Convention. Article 7 hadn't been invoked in over 300 years. It was a provision that allowed any sapient species under attack to demand neutral arbitration if they could demonstrate that their resistance was legitimate and effective. The catch was that the defending species had to prove they were capable of inflicting significant casualties on their attackers. Sarah's team had just provided that proof. War leader, Thax was now facing the worst possible scenario for a Vorthan commander. Not only was his ground assault failing, but the entire galaxy was watching his forces struggle against what they had assumed was a primitive species. If he continued the bombardment, he would be seen as incompetent. If he withdrew, he would be seen as weak. But Sarah wasn't finished with him yet. She had studied Vorthan honor codes extensively and knew that their military culture valued personal combat above all else. Using her knowledge of their language and customs, she issued a challenge that war leader Thax couldn't ignore without losing face in front of his entire fleet. Thax of the Vorthan Empire, she broadcast on open channels. Your soldiers lie dead in human streets, killed by human children with human weapons. Your mighty fleet cowers in orbit, afraid to face humans on equal terms. I, Sarah Chen of Earth, challenge you to personal combat, under the ancient laws of your people. If you defeat me, Earth surrenders. If I defeat you, your fleet withdraws and never returns. The challenge was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species that had ever been threatened by Vorthan expansion suddenly focused on Earth, waiting to see if the seemingly impossible was about to happen. Thax had no choice. In Vorthan culture, refusing a formal challenge from someone who had already demonstrated combat effectiveness would mark him as a coward forever. His own officers would likely execute him before they returned to Vorthan space, but accepting the challenge meant fighting a human who had already proven capable of defeating his best soldiers. The response came 6 hours later. War leader Thax would meet Agent Phoenix in single combat at the location of her choosing. Standard Vorthan combat rules would apply. Each fighter could use any weapons or equipment they could carry. Personally, Sarah chose the university football stadium where she had spent 4 years pretending to be a normal student. It was symbolic, practical, and gave her every possible advantage. She knew every entrance, every sight line, and every environmental factor that could be exploited. As she prepared for the battle that would determine Earth's fate, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 4 years ago, she had been a scared teenager trained for war but hoping she would never have to fight. Now she was about to face the most dangerous warrior in known space in single combat, with the survival of her species at stake. But she was no longer the shy girl who had hidden in the back of classrooms. She was Agent Phoenix, trained by the best military minds in the galaxy and enhanced with technology that pushed human capabilities beyond their natural limits. More importantly, she was fighting for something that Vorthon warriors had never truly understood. Not conquest or glory, but the simple human right to exist free from fear. As she stood in the stadium where thousands of humans had gathered to watch their fate decided, Sarah felt the weight of not just Earth's survival, but humanity's future among the stars. If she won, humans would be respected as a species that couldn't be conquered. If she lost, Earth would burn and humanity would be remembered as another failed civilization. The irony wasn't lost on her. The shy girl who had never wanted attention was about to become the most watched person in galactic history. The stadium filled with 50,000 humans who refused to evacuate, despite knowing they were about to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or its final defeat. They came from across the city, students, professors, families, children, elderly people who remembered when humans first looked up at the stars and dreamed of what lay beyond. They came to show that humans would face their fate with eyes open and heads held high. War leader Thax descended from orbit in a personal combat craft that looked like a falling star. The ship landed at the center of the football field, its engines scorching the artificial turf as the hull cooled from atmospheric entry. When the boarding ramp lowered, the Vorthon commander emerged in full ceremonial armor that had been worn by 47 generations of conquerors. He stood 3 meters tall, covered in obsidian plates that had turned aside the weapons of countless enemies. His primary arms carried an energy rifle that could punch through starship armor. His secondary arms held melee weapons forged from metals that existed only in the cores of dying stars. Bioluminescent patterns on his armor showed his rank, his victories, and his genetic lineage stretching back 1,000 years. Sarah walked onto the field wearing her college sweatshirt, jeans, and the same thick glasses she had worn to hide her enhanced vision. She carried what appeared to be a standard human assault rifle and a combat knife that looked like it had been purchased at a sporting goods store. To anyone watching, she looked like a child about to face a living nightmare. That was exactly the image she wanted to project. Thax spoke first, his voice amplified by translation devices so every human in the stadium could understand his words. "Small human, you have fought well for a primitive species. I honor your courage by offering you one final chance to surrender. Your death will be quick and without pain." Sarah looked up at the massive alien warrior and smiled. It was the same shy, nervous smile she had worn in thousands of college classes. "Thanks for the offer," she said, her voice carrying across the stadium through amplifiers that Jessica had hacked. "But I think I'll pass." The formal combat ritual required each fighter to state their intentions before battle began. Thax declared his purpose in the ancient Vorthon language. "I fight for the honor of the Empire, for the glory of conquest, and for the expansion of Vorthon dominance across the galaxy." Sarah's response was simpler. "I fight because somebody has to." The battle began with Thax's energy rifle discharging at full power. The beam that lanced across the stadium could have destroyed a tank, but Sarah was no longer where it struck. Her enhanced reflexes and 4 years of studying Vorthon combat patterns allowed her to predict his targeting algorithms. She rolled left, came up running, and fired 3 shots from her apparently primitive weapon. The bullets struck Thax's armor and bounced off harmlessly, exactly as expected. But the real purpose of those shots wasn't to damage him. It was to measure his reaction time and movement patterns under combat conditions. Thax pursued her across the field, firing continuously with weapons that turned sections of the stadium into molten craters. Sarah stayed ahead of his targeting, using the terrain and her knowledge of human sports architecture to break his line of sight repeatedly. To the Vorthon commander, it looked like a terrified prey animal fleeing desperately from a superior predator. That's when Sarah revealed the first surprise. As Thax rounded the corner of the goalpost in pursuit, Sarah was waiting for him, but not where he expected. She had used her enhanced strength to climb the 15-meter goalpost structure and was hanging upside down directly above him. Her assault rifle was gone, replaced by weapons that definitely hadn't come from any human sporting goods. The plasma rifle in her hands fired a bolt of contained stellar matter that struck Thax directly in the center of his chest armor. The impact sent him stumbling backward as bioluminescent patterns on his armor flickered and dimmed. For the first time in his military career, War Leader Thax had been successfully struck by an enemy weapon. "Sorry about the deception," Sarah called down to him as she dropped from the goalpost in a controlled fall. "But humans don't fight fair when our species is at stake." Now Thax saw his opponent clearly for the first time. The shy college girl was gone, replaced by a warrior who moved with perfect balance and carried herself with the confidence of someone trained in every form of combat known to galactic civilization. Her thick glasses had been discarded, revealing eyes that tracked his every movement with predatory focus. "You are not what you appeared to be," Thax said, his voice carrying grudging respect. "None of us are," Sarah replied. "That's what your intelligence reports missed. You studied humanity from a distance and saw what we wanted you to see. You never understood that every human is capable of becoming something dangerous when we're threatened. The real battle began then." Thax abandoned his initial strategy of overwhelming firepower and switched to close-quarters combat, where his size and strength should have given him decisive advantages. He charged across the field with melee weapons that could cut through starship hulls. Sarah met his charge head-on, moving inside his guard with footwork that combined human martial arts with combat techniques from a dozen alien species. Her combat knife, which had appeared so primitive, began to glow with the same energy signature as his star-forged weapons. For 10 minutes, they fought across the football field in a display of combat skill that was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Thax's weapons carved trenches in the earth where Sarah had been standing milliseconds before. Sarah's knife left glowing cuts in armor that had never been breached by enemy weapons. But Sarah's real advantage wasn't her enhanced abilities or advanced weapons. It was that she fought like a human. Every move was unpredictable, every tactic was adapted on the fly, and every apparent retreat was actually a setup for the next attack. She used environmental factors that Thax had never considered: the stadium lights to create blinding reflections, the artificial turf to affect his footing, even the crowd noise to mask the sound of her movements. The turning point came when Thax, frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow, overextended himself in a massive overhead strike that would have split Sarah in half. Instead of dodging, she stepped directly into the attack, catching his weapon arm with both hands and using his own momentum to flip him over her shoulder. A 3-meter-tall, fourth-hand warrior in full armor crashed into the stadium turf with enough force to crack the concrete underneath. Before he could recover, Sarah was on top of him, her energy knife pressed against the one gap in his armor that could reach vital organs. "Yield," she said quietly. Thax looked up at the small human, who had somehow defeated him, and saw something in her eyes that made him understand why his species' intelligence reports had been so completely wrong. It wasn't just that she was enhanced or well-trained. It was that she represented something his people had never encountered, a species that fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to exist. "I yield," he said, his voice carrying across the stadium through translation devices. The crowd erupted in celebration that could be heard from orbit, but Sarah's work wasn't finished. She helped Thax to his feet and activated her quantum communicator on frequencies that reached across the galaxy. "This is Agent Phoenix to all Vorthan vessels in Earth orbit," she said formally. "Your war leader has yielded in honorable combat. By the ancient laws of your people, this system is now under human protection. Any ship that does not begin immediate withdrawal will be considered hostile." The response came from Thax himself, speaking to his own fleet. "All vessels, begin withdrawal to rally point 7. The humans have proven themselves worthy of respect." As the Vorthan ships disappeared into hyperspace, Sarah looked around the stadium at 50,000 humans who were cheering not just for victory, but for the knowledge that their species would survive to see the stars. She thought about the journey from shy college girl to humanity's defender, and realized that the most important part hadn't been the enhanced abilities or advanced training. It had been learning that even the most ordinary person could become extraordinary when fighting for something worth protecting. Every human in that stadium had the same potential she did. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. War leader Thakix approached her as his ship prepared for departure. "Agent Phoenix," he said, using her formal rank for the first time. "You fought with honor. The Vorthon Empire will remember this day." Sarah smiled, and for a moment she was just a 19-year-old college student again. "Thanks. And maybe next time you want to conquer a species, try asking nicely first. You might be surprised how reasonable we can be when we're not being threatened with extinction." As Thakix's ship lifted off, Sarah stood in the center of the football field where she had once sat in the bleachers pretending to be a normal student. Around her, 50,000 humans were celebrating humanity's first victory in galactic politics. Above her, the stars no longer seemed cold and distant but welcoming. The shy girl in class had saved the world. But more importantly, she had shown the galaxy that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. Not as conquerors, but as the species that refused to quit when fighting for what mattered. Jessica ran onto the